Luke Harding had lived most of his life on the wide, open land of northern Arizona, where the hills rolled like waves and the wind always carried the smell of dust, pine, and horses. He was a man who spoke softly but worked hard, known in town as someone who kept to himself. His ranch was small, not rich or famous, but it was enough for him. He fixed his own fences, tended his cattle, and rode the trails every morning with a calm routine he had followed since he was young. One warm afternoon, the kind where the sun hung lazily over the sky, Luke spotted a fence post near the creek line leaning dangerously low. Coyotes probably pushed through the night before. He carried his tools, walked toward the boundary, and bent down to check the damage. The creek beside him was narrow but deep, flowing from the reservation land into his own. Luke usually worked there alone. He never expected company. That day, however, he heard soft footsteps near the water. When he looked up, he saw her Nia Talaco. She moved carefully, as if each step had a memory attached to it. She held a large clay container against her hip, its weight clear from the way her arms trembled slightly. Her long, dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her clothes showed signs of long workdays. Even from a distance, Luke could see tired shadows under her eyes, the kind that came not just from lack of sleep but from years of carrying too many worries alone. Nia was an Apache widow, known across both the reservation and the nearby town. People whispered about her more than they spoke to her. Some pitied her. Others judged her. She had lost her husband in an accident that many still argued about. Some said it was a misunderstanding with outsiders. Others said it was simply bad luck. But whatever the truth was, the loss changed everything for her. It made her guarded. It made her believe the world only approached her when it wanted something. Luke had seen her only twice before, both times at a distance. He never spoke to her. He never felt he needed to. But today, seeing her struggle with the heavy container, he felt an instinctive pull, simple human kindness, nothing more. He stood up slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Ma'am," he called softly, "that looks heavy. Need a hand?" Nia froze immediately, her shoulders stiff, her grip tightening on the container. She didn't lift her face. She kept her eyes on the ground as if steadying herself. For a few long seconds, she didn't speak. The creek continued to flow between them, the only sound filling the air. When she finally raised her head, her expression wasn't angry, just guarded, as if she had built a wall so high no one could climb it. Her voice trembled, not from fear but from a mix of frustration and exhaustion that had been buried too long. "Rancher," she said sharply, "do you just want something from me like everyone else?" The words hit Luke harder than he expected. Not because they were rude, but because he could feel the pain behind them. It wasn't a question meant for him, it was a question she had been waiting to ask the world. He didn't move closer. He didn't want her to feel cornered. Instead, he set his tools down and straightened his gloves with slow, calm hands. "No," he said quietly. "I don't want anything from you. I just saw someone struggling, that's all." Nia's jaw tightened as if she didn't believe a single word. She stepped back slightly, adjusting the container as if preparing to leave. Her eyes flicked to him cautiously, searching for the hidden intention she believed every stranger had. Luke didn't blame her for doubting him. Anyone could see she had lived through enough disappointment to last a lifetime. He knew that when people go through repeated loss, even kindness feels suspicious. He nodded once, a simple gesture of respect, then bent back down to the broken fence. He didn't say another word. He didn't try to approach her again. He worked quietly, giving her space. Nia hesitated longer than she needed to. She watched him for a moment, long enough to realize he truly wasn't looking at her anymore, nor waiting for her response, nor expecting anything from her. She wasn't used to that. Most people who offered help wanted to know her business, her land issues, her family history, or her plans. But the rancher said his piece and returned to his task, as if her acceptance or refusal didn't change his intention to be decent. She shifted the heavy container slightly, and the strain made her wince. Luke heard the small sound but didn't comment. He just glanced up briefly, meeting her eyes with calm concern. Not pity, not curiosity, just concern. You'll hurt your back carrying it like that, he said softly. She tightened her fingers around the handle. I can manage. I know, Luke answered. But you don't have to. For a moment. Something flickered across her face, confusion mixed with something softer. Something unsure. But she pushed it away. Trust was a dangerous thing to hand out, especially after losing so much. She turned away and walked back toward the reservation trail, her steps slow but steady. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of the creek and the soft rustle of her footsteps fading into the distance. Luke watched her leave, but only for a second. He didn't want her to feel watched, so he forced himself to return to fixing the fence. Still, the sound of her earlier questions stayed with him longer than he expected. He wasn't a man who chased after people's approval. But her voice, from the way it cracked slightly, kept echoing in his chest. Do you just want something from me like everyone else? What had she gone through to believe that everyone wanted to use her? How many hands had reached toward her only to take? Luke hammered a new post into the ground, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and sighed. He knew he had no place in her life. She belonged to a different history, a different community, a different world. But he also knew loneliness when he saw it, and hers was deeper than the creek that ran between their lands. He didn't go into town that evening. Instead, he rode his horse along the boundary trail, checking on areas he normally ignored. Maybe he hoped to catch another glimpse of her. Maybe he just needed to clear his thoughts. The sky had turned a deep orange as the sun dipped behind the distant hills. The world felt peaceful, but Luke couldn't shake the feeling that something heavy rested on Naya's shoulders, something she carried alone. Later that night, while feeding his horse, he caught himself wondering about her, about the way she guarded her heart, about the way she looked tired even when she stood tall, about the way she questioned him without hesitation, as if expecting disappointment before it even arrived. He knew then that their brief meeting wasn't going to fade from his memory. Nia, on her way home, also kept replaying the moment. She expected him to react angrily or mock her suspicion, but he hadn't. He only nodded and stepped back. No pressure. No expectations. That unsettled her more than anything. The world had taught her to be cautious, to doubt every gesture, to protect herself like a warrior even when she no longer felt strong. But the rancher's calm eyes didn't hold hunger or interest or hidden motives. They held patience. They held sincerity. And that was unfamiliar to her. When she reached her small home near the reservation border, she set down the container and leaned against the wall, trying to steady her heart. She didn't know what to think of him. She didn't know why his voice stayed in her mind. She didn't know why she felt less alone today, just a little, barely noticeable, but real. Naya whispered to herself, almost confused. Why was he different? Luke wasn't thinking about being different. He was thinking about how a single question from a stranger could reveal so much pain. He didn't know where their paths would cross next, but he had a feeling it wouldn't be the last time. And somewhere, under the quiet Arizona night sky, two lonely souls who tried so hard to stay hidden had unknowingly taken their first small step toward changing each other's lives. Several days passed after their brief meeting by the creek, but neither Luke nor Nia forgot what had happened. Luke continued his quiet work around the ranch. But every so often his thoughts drifted to the Apache widow, who carried more burdens than any one person should. He wondered if she ever allowed herself to rest, to breathe, or to accept help without fear. He did not expect to see her again soon. But life had its own ways of bringing two paths together. In town, however, a wave of whispers began to flow from one table to another, from the supply store to the feed shop. Land developers had returned wealthy men with polished shoes and loaded promises, trying to convince families on the reservation border to sell small strips of property. They talked about new projects, water rights, and business expansion. Most people ignored them, but they didn't ignore Nia. Luke overheard one of them speaking at the counter while he waited for a sack of feed. The man was smiling, but his words carried a wrong kind of confidence. That widow won't hold out long, he said. People like her don't have the strength to fight pressure. Luke's hands tightened around the sack. He didn't like the tone, and he didn't like how casually they spoke about someone who had already suffered enough. He kept quiet, but the words settled like dust in his chest. He realized then that her question at the creek wasn't random. It came from real experiences, from real threats, from people who had tried to take advantage of her pain. 2 days later, an early evening storm swept through the region. Dark clouds rolled over the mountains, carrying thunder and heavy rain that soaked the dry earth within minutes. Luke had planned to stay inside, patching his old saddle, but something urged him to ride out and check the back trail before it flooded. He saddled his horse quickly and headed toward the old route that led past the reservation. The wind howled, brushing cold rain across his face. The path was muddy, and water filled every low spot. As he rode, he noticed tire tracks ahead, deep ones, fresh and sinking dangerously into the soft ground. He frowned. Few people used this trail during a storm. He followed the tracks until he saw a small truck tilted on one side, stuck deep in the mud. And standing beside it, soaked from head to toe, was Nia. She leaned into the door, pushing with all the strength she had, but the wheels only sank deeper. Her braid was undone, her clothes plastered to her skin from the rain, and her hands were shaking from cold and frustration. She didn't hear Luke approaching over the storm's noise, but when he called her name, she startled and turned sharply. Her eyes widened for a moment, maybe in embarrassment, maybe in shock, maybe both. She quickly tried to compose herself. "I'm fine," she said before he could even ask. "I can handle it." Luke dismounted without arguing. He didn't rush toward her. He simply walked next to the stuck tire, knelt down, and began clearing clumps of wet mud with his bare hands. Rain fell hard on his back, but he kept working. Nia stared at him, torn between wanting to refuse and wanting to cry from relief. "You didn't have to come here," she said softly, raising her voice only enough to be heard over the storm. "I didn't know you were here," Luke answered calmly. "I was just checking the trail. Lucky timing." I was..." She looked away as if unsure how to respond. Luke pushed more mud aside, then grabbed a broken branch to wedge behind the tire for traction. When he stood up, he met her eyes carefully. "Get inside the truck," he said. "Try giving it some gas when I say so." Rain dripped from her hair as she nodded silently. She climbed into the seat, her soaked hands gripping the wheel. Luke positioned himself behind the truck, bracing his boots in the mud. He gave a small signal, and the engine roared. The tires spun, flinging mud everywhere, but finally they found the stick, and the wheel jolted free. Luke pushed with all his weight, and the truck lurched forward onto solid ground. When it settled safely, Nia jumped out again. She looked at Luke, really looked at him. He was covered in mud, breathing heavily from pushing, but he didn't show any irritation. He didn't look at her with judgment or superiority. He just checked the truck one more time to make sure it wasn't damaged. "You okay?" he asked gently. Nia swallowed, unsure how to express what she felt. She had lost count of the times people offered help only to demand something afterward. But Luke, even now, wasn't asking anything. He offered his jacket, which was somehow still dry underneath his raincoat. "You'll get cold driving like that," he said. "I'll be fine," she replied automatically. "Take it anyway," Luke insisted softly. "It won't bother me." She hesitated, then slowly reached for the jacket. It felt strange to accept something without feeling trapped by it. "Thank you," she murmured. Luke nodded and stepped back toward his horse. He didn't ask where she lived. He didn't ask if she needed company on the way home. He simply checked that the road ahead wasn't flooded. "Drive slow," he said. "The trail gets slippery closer to the ridge." Nia stood in the rain watching him. Her fingers tightened around the jacket he had given her. She should have left immediately, but something held her there. She felt an unfamiliar warmth in her chest, something gentle, something safe, something she hadn't felt in a long time. When Luke mounted his horse, she finally found the courage to speak. "Why did you help me again?" "Why? Why?" He looked at her with a simple, honest expression. "Because you needed help," he said. That's reason enough. There was no deeper explanation, no hidden meaning, just truth. Nia lowered her gaze, unable to trust her own voice. She climbed into the truck and started the engine. Before leaving, she glanced out the window. Luke was already checking the trail again, as if her rescue had been just another part of his day. As she drove home slowly, her thoughts swirled like the storm clouds above. She didn't understand him. She didn't understand why a man who barely knew her cared whether she got home safely. She didn't understand why he didn't look at her the way others did, seeing her as a target, a burden, or a complicated problem. Instead, he saw her as someone who deserved kindness, and that confused her more than anything else. When Nia reached her small home, she sat in the truck for several minutes, holding his jacket. It smelled faintly like cedar and the outdoors. She pressed it against her chest, not because she needed warmth, but because it reminded her of something she had forgotten what it felt like to be treated gently. Meanwhile, Luke rode home soaked and muddy, but he didn't care. He fed his horse, cleaned his boots, and placed his wet gloves by the stove to dry. But his mind wasn't on the chores. It was on Nia, on her trembling voice, her cautious eyes, and the way she tried so hard to stand alone even when she was sinking. He wondered what battles she faced that no one saw. He wondered if she had anyone who looked out for her. He wondered if she would ever trust him fully. He hoped she would, not because he wanted something from her, but because he had seen the loneliness she carried, and a part of him wished she didn't have to carry it alone. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind fresh air, soft sunlight, and small puddles across the ranch land. Luke walked the fence line as usual, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Nia. He wondered if she had reached home safely, whether the trail had remained clear, and whether she had warmed up after being soaked in the rain. He didn't plan on seeing her today, but life had a habit of surprising him whenever she was involved. Nia, on the other hand, spent her morning fighting with her own heart. She had placed Luke's jacket neatly on a chair near her door. Every time she passed by it, she felt a strange tightness in her chest, something between gratitude and confusion. She was not used to someone helping her twice without wanting anything. It didn't make sense. Kindness always came with a price in her experience. Yet Luke's actions had no strings attached. That unsettled her more than anything else. For hours she tried to ignore the memory of him pushing her truck free in the storm. But no matter how hard she focused on her chores, washing dishes, feeding her small herd of goats, sweeping the dust from her porch, her mind kept returning to his quiet voice, his calm hands, his patience. By afternoon, she gave up trying to pretend she wasn't thinking about him. She decided to walk to the creek to gather herbs growing near the boundary line. It was a familiar place, and she hoped being there would clear her mind. But when she arrived, she saw Luke on the other side, tightening the new fence post he had installed the day she met him. He looked up as soon as he heard her footsteps. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the water. There was no tension this time, only a soft, uncertain silence that made both of them aware of how much the last two encounters had changed things. Luke offered a small nod. "Afternoon." "Afternoon," she replied, her voice quieter than usual. She expected him to walk away or to get lost in his work again. Instead, he remained where he was, wiping dust from his gloves. Something in her chest loosened, not enough to be called trust yet, but enough that she didn't feel the need to run this time. Nia crouched near the water and began picking wild mint leaves. After a minute, she noticed Luke moving closer, though he still stood on his own side of the creek. "Storm didn't damage much?" she asked, surprising herself by starting a conversation. "Not too bad," he said. "Your truck okay?" She paused, then nodded. "Yes. Thanks to you." Her fingertips brushed the herbs, but her attention was on him. Luke smiled slightly, the kind of smile that came naturally, without force. "Glad to hear it." They fell into another silence, not awkward, just unfamiliar. Nia had spent so long avoiding people that she didn't know how to make small talk anymore. Luke, being quiet by nature, waited for her to set the pace. Yet something about his calm presence made her feel less pressured. Finally, Nia spoke again. "People in town. They talk." Her voice held hesitation. "They always do," Luke replied lightly. About everyone. Yes, but about me they talk differently. She lowered her gaze. Some think I'm weak. Some think I'm easy to convince. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Luke already knew what she meant. He rested his hands on the fence and leaned slightly forward, his tone gentle but certain. They're wrong. They're wrong. Naya's breath caught, though she didn't understand why. You don't even know me, she said, almost defensively. I know enough, Luke answered. You work hard. You carry things alone. And you speak your mind even when it hurts. That isn't weakness. She opened her mouth to reply, then closed it. She didn't know how to argue with kindness that felt so genuine. As the afternoon sun grew warmer, Nia moved to sit on a flat rock beside the creek. Luke hesitated but eventually stepped onto the larger stones that crossed the shallow water. Stopping near her but not too close, he respected the invisible boundaries she held, even the ones she didn't speak aloud. For a while, they talked about simple things, about the way the rain brought new green to the dry desert, about the coyotes that prowled after storms, about the best season for gathering berries. Luke found himself listening more than he talked. Nia, to her own surprise, found talking easier than she expected. It had been months since she had a conversation that wasn't filled with pressure or fear. Slowly, she opened up about her husband. She spoke carefully, as if each memory was a fragile stone she placed between them. He was a good man, she said softly. Stubborn, but good. He used to fix this part of the trail. Every time it rained, he checked the washout. She smiled faintly, a smile that carried sadness and fondness together. Luke listened without interrupting. The way he looked at her, steady, patient, made her feel safe enough to continue. When he passed, she said, everything changed. People stopped seeing me as a person. They saw me as someone they could push aside, someone who couldn't fight back. Her fingers tightened around a small mint leaf. So I learned to push everyone away first. Luke's voice lowered. I understand. No, she whispered. You don't. He didn't argue. He didn't claim to know her pain. Instead, he spoke quietly. You're right. I don't know everything you've been through. But I can see you're strong. And I can see you're tired of carrying too much alone. Her eyes shimmered slightly, but she blinked quickly, refusing to let emotions spill out. She didn't want to be seen as fragile. But sitting beside him, she didn't feel judged. She felt understood, even if only a little. To change the subject, Nia stood and handed him a small bundle of herbs. For cuts, she said. You work with fences a lot. These help with wounds. She hesitated. It's a thank you for the storm. Luke took the herbs gently, as if accepting something precious. Thank you, he said. That means a lot. Nia felt warmth spread across her chest, not romance, not yet, but something softer than fear and calmer than suspicion. It felt like trust trying to grow roots. As the sun dipped lower, Nia gathered her things. Luke walked her along the creek trail, keeping a respectful distance. The silence between them was different now, comfortable, peaceful. Before they parted ways, she turned to him. People don't usually listen to me, she said. I do, Luke replied simply. She held his gaze for a long moment. Something shifted inside her, something she didn't have words for. She gave a small nod. I'll see you again. Luke felt a quiet warmth in his chest as he watched her walk away. She didn't rush, didn't tense, didn't hide her face this time. She walked with a little more ease, as if her steps were lighter. He didn't know what their future would look like. He didn't know whether she would trust him fully or push him away again when fear returned. But he knew one thing with certainty: she had let him into her world just a little, and that was more than he expected. As for Nia, she returned home with a calm she hadn't felt in months. She placed the empty herb basket on her table and sat quietly, thinking about the rancher who listened, the rancher who didn't push, the rancher who made her feel seen in a way she had forgotten was possible. She whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, Maybe. Not everyone wants something from me. It was only a small hope, but it was enough to change everything. The peaceful days that followed made both Luke and Nia believe that maybe life was finally settling into something calm. They still met near the creek from time to time. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they simply shared space in silence. It wasn't a friendship defined by many words, but by quiet understanding. And that was enough for them. But calm moments never lasted long in real life, especially for someone like Nia, someone many people thought they could pressure or control. One warm afternoon, Nia walked into the small trading post near town to deliver herbs she had promised to the owner. The place was usually friendly and quiet, with wooden shelves filled with handmade items, local crafts, and food from the reservation. But that day, the air felt heavy the moment she stepped inside. 3 men in polished boots and clean shirts were standing near the counter, the same group of land developers Luke had overheard earlier. They turned in unison when they noticed her. Their eyes lit up not with friendliness, but with the greedy excitement of people who believed they had finally cornered their target. Nia Talako. One of them greeted her with a wide smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We've been wanting to speak to you." She tightened her grip on the small basket in her hands. "I'm busy," she said calmly. "I have no business with you." "Oh, but we do," another man said, stepping closer. "Your land borders a water route we need. It's a perfect opportunity for you to make some money. You should consider our offer." "I already said no," Nia replied, her voice firm. "You should reconsider," the first man insisted, lowering his tone as if giving a warning. "It would be easier for everyone." "Ever." The owner of the trading post watched nervously from behind the counter but didn't interfere. The men were outsiders, but they carried authority that made most people hesitant to speak against them. Nia tried to walk past them, but one stepped slightly to the side, blocking her path, not touching her, but crowding her space enough to make her uncomfortable. "You can't keep refusing forever," he said. "It's not good for you." Nia's heart tightened. She wasn't scared of standing up for herself, but she was tired. Tired of being treated like someone with no voice. Tired of being pressured because she didn't have a husband or a big family to support her. Every time she faced these men, she felt the loss of her husband more sharply. Before she could respond, the bell above the trading post door jingled. Luke stepped inside. He stopped the moment he saw the scene, the men standing around Nia, her tense shoulders, her lowered chin. In an instant, he understood everything. His calm nature didn't disappear, but it shifted into something solid, something protective. He walked forward without rushing. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice steady and firm. The men turned. Their confident expressions faded slightly when they realized the rancher wasn't afraid of them. "This doesn't concern you," one said sharply. "It concerns me if you're bothering her," Luke replied. "We're having a conversation, that's all," the other man said. "She said no," Luke answered. "That means the conversation is over." The room fell silent. Even the trading post owner stood perfectly still. Nia watched Luke, surprise flickering across her face. She didn't expect him to appear, not today, not in this moment. She also didn't expect him to speak with such calm but unshakable certainty. One of the men stepped toward Luke, puffing out his chest as if to prove something. "Do you even understand what's at stake here? We're offering her a deal." "And she refused," Luke said. "Respect it. You can't tell us what to do," the man snapped. Luke didn't raise his voice. He didn't take a threatening stance. He simply stepped slightly closer to Nia, placing himself between her and the men, not touching her, not claiming anything, just standing there like a quiet shield. "You're on reservation business," Luke said, "and you're not part of it. Leave her alone." The men exchanged annoyed glances. They weren't used to being told no, especially not by a rancher who stood alone. But the look in Luke's eyes, calm, certain, unyielding, made them hesitate. Finally, the first man huffed. "This isn't over." "No," Luke replied. "It is," she gave her answer. The men left the trading post, the bell ringing sharply as the door slammed behind them. For several seconds, the room remained still, the tension slowly fading like smoke in open air. Nia stood frozen, her breath uneven. She didn't know what to say. She didn't expect anyone to step in for her. She had spent so long fighting her battles alone that she forgot what it felt like to have someone stand with her. Luke turned to her slowly. "Are you all right?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Her chest felt tight. Not from fear, but from confusion and something deeper, something that felt like relief mixed with surprise. Finally, she whispered, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Luke replied softly. "But I couldn't stand by and watch them pressure you." Nia looked away quickly, as if trying to hide the emotion in her eyes. "People always want something," she whispered. "They only help me when they want something in return. I don't understand why you keep showing up." Luke's voice softened even more. "I'm not here to take anything from you, Nia. I don't want your land. I don't want anything that hurts you. I just don't want to see you alone against people who think they can walk over you." His words washed over her like a quiet breeze, warming something inside her she thought had gone cold forever. "I'm scared," she admitted suddenly, her voice shaking slightly. "Not of them, but of needing help again, of trusting someone." Luke didn't move closer. He didn't reach for her. He respected her space because he understood her fear. "You don't have to trust me all at once," he said gently. "You don't have to trust anyone. Just know that I'm here, and I'll stay as long as you want me to." Her breath caught. She wasn't used to such sincerity. She wasn't used to someone giving her the choice. The trading post owner quietly pretended to rearrange shelves, giving them privacy even though he was only a few steps away. Nia finally lifted her eyes to Luke's. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Luke's answer was simple. "Because you deserve kindness." She blinked slowly, shocked by the simplicity of it. He added quietly, "You've lived through enough hurt. You shouldn't have to fight everything by yourself." The words touched something deep inside her. Something she had buried years ago. She felt a tear form at the corner of her eye, and she quickly brushed it away, refusing to let it fall. "Luke," she murmured, unsure of what else to say. "You don't owe me anything," he said softly. "Not thanks, not trust, not explanations. I'm not here to take. I'm just here." Those words settled into her heart with surprising weight. For the first time, she didn't feel threatened by someone's presence. She didn't feel pressured or cornered. She felt supported. Later that evening, after Luke walked her safely home, Nia watched him leave until he disappeared down the trail. Her heart ached in a way she couldn't explain. Not with fear, but with hope. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't standing alone in the world. And that realization changed everything. The days after the incident at the trading post brought a quiet shift in the way Nia carried herself. She still guarded her heart, still moved with caution, but something inside her felt lighter, like a weight she had been carrying for years had finally loosened. For the first time since her husband passed, she did not feel like the world was pressing on her from all sides. She didn't know exactly why, but she suspected it had something to do with a rancher who refused to let her fight alone. Luke didn't visit her home or push himself into her life. He respected her boundaries the same way he always had. But they crossed paths more often now, sometimes near the creek, sometimes along the trail, sometimes when she came into town. Each meeting brought a sense of calm, and each conversation made the silence between them softer, more comforting. One morning, Luke decided to repair a section of the fence that bordered the reservation land. He noticed tracks in the dirt, light footprints, and flattened patches of grass that told him someone had been there recently. He smiled quietly when he recognized them as Nia's. She must have walked the trail earlier that morning. As he worked, he saw her approaching in the distance. She carried a small woven basket and walked with purpose. When she reached him, she hesitated for a moment before offering the basket. "For you," she said softly. Luke wiped his hands on his jeans and opened the basket. Inside were fresh herbs, small loaves of bread, and dried berries. Simple foods, but prepared with care. "You didn't have to do this," Luke said. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to." Her voice held no fear this time, only sincerity. He thanked her, and she sat on a flat rock nearby as he continued fixing the fence. The two of them talked about the land, the animals, and the weather. Nothing dramatic, nothing heavy, but their words flowed easily, as if they had known each other much longer than they actually had. After a while, the conversation faded, but the silence that replaced it felt warm, not awkward. Luke tightened the last wire and gave the fence a gentle shake to test it. When he turned back, he found Nia watching him quietly, her expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking?" he asked gently. She hesitated as if choosing her words carefully. "I'm thinking, maybe I misjudged you." Luke blinked, surprised by her honesty. "How so?" "I thought you were like everyone else," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I thought you helped me because you wanted something. Because people only show kindness when it benefits them." He didn't respond right away. He could see how much effort it took for her to admit that. "When you helped me during the storm," she continued, "you didn't ask for anything. When you stepped between me and those men, you didn't ask for anything. When you listen, you don't ask for anything." She paused, swallowing. "I didn't know how to trust that. I didn't know how to trust you." Luke stepped closer, but not too close. "You don't have to trust me completely," he said. "Not all at once, but I'm not going anywhere." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, she didn't look away. As the afternoon sun warmed the land, Luke and Nia walked along the trail together. It wasn't planned. It just happened naturally. He walked beside her, matching her pace, giving her space when she needed it, and offering his presence when she didn't speak. And she found that she didn't mind his quiet companionship. In fact, she welcomed it. They reached a ridge that overlooked a wide stretch of golden desert. The wind blew gently through the grass, carrying with it the scent of sage and warm dust. Nia stood still for a long moment, letting the view fill her chest with peace. Luke stood beside her, hands in his pockets, giving her time to gather her thoughts. After several minutes, she turned to him. Her voice trembled slightly, but not from fear, rather from the weight of something important she needed to say. "Luke," she whispered, "do you want something from me?" It was the same question she asked him the first day they met, but now it carried a different meaning. Her tone wasn't sharp, defensive, or hurt. It was gentle, vulnerable, hopeful. Luke took a slow breath. He understood exactly what she was asking. "I don't want anything from you," he said softly. "I don't want your land. I don't want anything you're scared of losing. I don't want to take anything." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I just want the chance to be someone you don't have to guard yourself against." Her eyes glistened slightly, reflecting the sunlight. She felt something warm settle in her chest. A warmth she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. He continued, "I want to walk beside you. Not ahead. Not behind. Just beside you. If you'll let me." Nia exhaled shakily. No one had ever spoken to her that way. No one had ever given her the choice so gently, without pressure, without fear. She felt a tear finally slip free. But this time she didn't hide it. She stepped closer, not enough to bridge every distance between them, but enough to show she wanted to. "Then stay," she whispered. Luke's breath caught. He didn't answer with words at first. Instead, he gave a slow, sincere nod. "I will." They stood together on the ridge, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Neither of them moved for a long time. The desert stretched endlessly in front of them, peaceful and warm, and for the first time in years, Nia didn't feel alone. Later that evening, they returned to the creek. Luke helped her gather a few fallen branches for her firewood. She showed him how to identify certain herbs growing near the water. They shared quiet smiles and soft laughter moments, small enough to seem ordinary, but meaningful enough to stay with them forever. As the sky darkened, Luke walked her home, keeping a comfortable distance like always, but something between them had changed. She didn't glance over her shoulder with fear. She didn't tense when his footsteps fell beside hers. She didn't rush to hide behind walls she had kept up for so long. Instead, she walked slowly, letting the night air surround them, letting the silence speak for them. When they reached her door, she turned to him. The lantern light reflected in her eyes, making them shine softly. "Luke," she said, "I'm glad you came into my life." He smiled, not wide, not dramatic, but warm and genuine. "I'm glad you let me in." She touched the edge of his jacket sleeve gently, a brief, hesitant gesture, but one filled with meaning. Then she stepped back, offering him a small, peaceful smile. "Good night." "Good night, Nia." Luke began walking back down the trail. But she stayed at the door, watching him until he disappeared beyond the curve. Her heart felt full not with fear, but with trust. Real, steady trust. For the first time in a long time, she knew she wasn't facing life alone. And as she closed her door behind her, she whispered into the quiet night, "Maybe this is a new beginning." It was, for both of them,